He saw his wife as a simple footnote in the grand story of his success. While he chased promotions and accolades, his pregnant wife Hannah was just a part of the domestic scenery. He came home to a problem to be managed, a need to be ignored. He was a man on the rise, destined for greatness, and the upcoming Innovators Gala was his stage. He told her she wouldn't fit in among the city's elite. But what he didn't know was that while he was fighting for a seat at the table, his wife already owned it. Tonight, he would walk into that glittering ballroom, expecting praise, only to watch the woman he disregarded step into the spotlight as the one person everyone, including his own boss, was desperate to meet. Josiah Fitzpatrick believed the world was divided into two types of people, those who made things happen and those who watched them happen. He was unequivocally the former. Every morning, the reflection that stared back at him from his minimalist steel-framed mirror was that of a conqueror. His jaw was sharp, his suits were tailored to perfection, and his ambition burned with the intensity of a forge. At 32, he was a senior analyst at Thornton & Gage, one of the city's most aggressive investment firms, and he was on a trajectory aimed straight for the stars. His current obsession, the singular focus of his every waking moment, was the annual Innovators Gala. It wasn't just a party. It was a battleground where careers were made or broken, and Josiah intended to be the victor. At home, however, another world was being created, one he participated in only biologically. His wife, Hannah Reed, was 7 months pregnant. She moved through their sterile, modern apartment with a gentle grace that seemed increasingly out of place amidst the sharp angles and cold surfaces Josiah preferred. Hannah had once been vibrant, her laughter echoing in their first tiny apartment. Now she was a ghost in a home that felt more like a showroom. The disconnect between them had become a chasm. This morning it was wider than ever. Josiah stood, knotting his silk tie, his eyes fixed on his phone, scrolling through market reports. Hannah sat at the breakfast bar, nursing a cup of peppermint tea, a faint line of worry creasing her brow. "Josiah," she began, her voice soft, tentative. "Dr. Finch's office called again. They really need to confirm our spot for the birthing class on Saturday." Josiah didn't look up. "Email my assistant. She'll check my calendar." "Saturday is probably out. I have the pre-gala networking brunch." Your assistant Hannah's voice held a note of disbelief. "It's a birthing class, Josiah. For us? About our baby." She placed a hand on her swollen belly, a protective, almost unconscious gesture. He finally glanced at her, his expression one of mild annoyance, as if she'd just interrupted a complex equation. "Hannah, you know what's on the line right now. The gala is everything. Mr. Donovan is going to be there. The board is going to be there. This is the final push for my partnership track. You can't possibly expect me to trade that for a lesson on how to breathe." The callousness of his words stung. "It's not just about breathing," she said, her voice dropping. "It's about being prepared. Together. You're a smart woman, you'll figure it out," he said, waving a dismissive hand as he grabbed his briefcase. "Look, I'm just being realistic. I'm the one out there building a future for this family. The least you can do is handle the domestic side of things without adding to my stress." He leaned in, gave her a perfunctory peck on the cheek that didn't come close to her lips, and was gone. The heavy front door clicked shut, leaving behind a silence that was louder than any argument. Hannah stared at the untouched plate of toast she'd made for him. This was their new normal. His life was a high-stakes thriller, and hers was a quiet domestic drama he had no interest in watching. He hadn't been to an ultrasound since the very first one, where the grainy image on the screen had elicited a brief, detached smile before he'd taken a call from the office. He'd forgotten doctor's appointments, dismissed her concerns about her swollen ankles as just a part of it, and responded to her excitement about feeling the baby kick with a distracted, "That's nice, dear." Her world had shrunk to the four walls of their apartment, while his had expanded to encompass the entire financial district. She had friends, of course, but she found herself making excuses for Josiah's absence so often that it became easier to just decline their invitations. The loneliness was a physical weight pressing down on her chest. A few days later, the turning point arrived sharp and terrifying. Hannah woke up with a cramping sensation that was different from the usual aches. It was a tight, persistent pain that radiated from her lower back. She tried to stay calm, drinking water and lying on her side as the pregnancy books suggested. But the pain intensified. A spike of pure fear shot through her. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Josiah's number. He picked up on the fourth ring. "Hannah, I'm walking into a meeting. Can this wait?" His voice was clipped impatient. "No, I don't think so," she stammered, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "I'm having these really bad cramps and I'm scared, Josiah. The book says I should call the doctor if you're always reading those books," he cut, in the exasperation clear. "Hannah, you're pregnant. Things are going to hurt. You're probably overreacting. Just take a bath or something. I have to go. Mr. Donovan is right here." "Josiah, please," she whispered, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I think something's wrong. I'll call you when I'm out," he said, his voice distant. "Don't worry about nothing." The line went dead. She sat there for a moment, the silence of the apartment amplifying her terror. "Don't worry about nothing." He had dismissed her fear as if it were a trivial complaint about the weather. She was completely, utterly alone. The pain seized her again, sharper this time. With a surge of adrenaline, Hannah wiped her tears, her fear hardening into something else resolve. She wasn't a fragile doll. She was a mother, and she would protect her child with or without him. She called a car service, her voice steady as she gave the address for the hospital. During the ride, clutching her belly, she didn't cry. Instead, she thought about the woman she had been before Josiah, a woman with ideas, with ambition, with a fire. He had slowly, methodically extinguished with his casual disregard. He saw her as an accessory to his life, a soft-focus background for his sharp, ambitious foreground. He had made her feel small, and for a long time she had accepted it. At the hospital, a kind nurse and a reassuring doctor confirmed it was a scare preterm labor contractions brought on by stress and dehydration. They managed to stop them, but the doctor's words echoed in her mind. "You need to reduce your stress, Ms. Reed. It's not good for you or the baby." Lying in the sterile hospital bed, listening to the steady, reassuring thump of her baby's heartbeat on the monitor, Hannah made a decision. Josiah wasn't just neglecting her. He was a liability to her child's well-being. The foundation of their marriage wasn't just cracked, it had crumbled into dust. She just hadn't been willing to see it until now. The fear she felt was replaced by a cold, clear certainty. Things were going to change. He thought he was the only one who could make things happen. He was about to find out how wrong he was. The world knew nothing of Hannah Reed, but a select, powerful few in the tech and philanthropy sectors knew a different name, AR. the enigmatic founder of the Reed Foundation. AR was a ghost, a legend whispered about in boardrooms, an investor with an uncanny eye for disruptive technology and a philanthropic heart that poured tens of millions into STEM education for underprivileged youth. No one knew their identity. All transactions and communications were handled through a formidable wall of lawyers and advisors, fronted by the elegant and fiercely loyal Madeline Shaw. Hannah Reed was AR. The initials stood for an inside joke between her and her late father, who used to call her Architect Reed because of her love for building complex computer systems as a child. The foundation wasn't built on Josiah's money. It was built on an inheritance from her parents, brilliant software engineers who had passed away in a car crash when she was 21. They had left her with a substantial portfolio of tech stocks and patents, a legacy she had quietly, astutely, and brilliantly grown into an empire. She had met Josiah a year after their death. He was charming, ambitious, and dazzling. He talked about building efforts, and she, still grieving and lost, was drawn to his certainty. But early on, whenever she'd tried to talk about her own ideas, her passion for coding and market analysis, he'd smiled condescendingly. "Leave the heavy lifting to me, babe," he'd said once. "You don't need to worry your pretty head about all that." The message was clear, his ambition was valid. Hers was a cute hobby. So she'd kept her world a secret. She'd let him believe her inheritance was a modest trust fund that allowed her not to work. It was easier. It was what he wanted. But lying in that hospital bed, Hannah realized that her silence had been a cage of her own making. She had shrunk herself to fit into his world, and in doing so had nearly lost herself completely. The stress that had put her and her baby at risk wasn't just from the pregnancy. It was the stress of being invisible. The moment she was discharged, she called Madeline. "I'm ready," Hannah said, her voice devoid of its usual softness. It was steel. Madeline, a woman who had been her mother's best friend and her own staunchest protector, didn't need any further explanation. "I've been waiting to hear you say that for 5 years. What's the plan?" "The innovator's gala," Hannah said, walking into her silent apartment. She passed the living room, where Josiah's ridiculously oversized portrait from a business magazine hung on the wall. "I'm looking at the sponsorship package right now. My foundation is listed as the anonymous benefactor." "Yes, you wanted to support the cause without the publicity," Madeline recalled. "Change it," Hannah said firmly. "I want to be the main sponsor, the keynote sponsor, whatever the highest level is, and I'm no longer anonymous. The sponsorship will be in the name of the Reed Foundation founder, Hannah Reed." There was a beat of silence on the other end, followed by a low, appreciative whistle. "Well, well, that's quite the coming out party. Thornton & Gage is a silver-tier sponsor, you know. Your husband's firm will be there, cap in hand, trying to impress your other guests." "I know," Hannah said, a humorless smile touching her lips. "That's the point. And one more thing, Madeline. I want to give the opening address." "Hannah, are you sure?" Madeline's voice was gentle. "Public speaking on that scale. And with everything you're going through." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Hannah replied, her gaze falling on a framed photo on the mantelpiece, a smiling, happy couple on their wedding day. The man in the photo was a stranger to her now. "For years, I've let my work speak for itself. It's time I gave it a voice. My voice." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of secret activity. While Josiah was engrossed in 80-hour work weeks polishing his presentation and networking relentlessly, Hannah was executing a corporate takeover of her own life. Her apartment became her command center. Madeline was a frequent visitor, bringing contracts and strategy documents. They had conference calls with marketing teams in London and venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. Hannah, dressed in comfortable maternity wear, commanded these meetings with a quiet authority that would have stunned her husband. She was decisive, insightful, and utterly in control. She hired a renowned speechwriter to help her hone her address, not to write it for her, but to perfect its delivery. She worked with a top stylist not to find a dress that would make her look beautiful for Josiah, but one that would make her feel powerful. They chose an emerald green floor-length gown of flowing silk that draped elegantly over her bump, paired with the simple, stunning diamond necklace her father had given her mother. It was armor. During this time, Josiah barely noticed the change. He saw the takeout containers and assumed she was too tired to cook. He saw her on the phone in the study and assumed she was talking to her mother. Her new energy, her focus. He mistook it all for nesting the strange hormonal rituals of an expectant mother he couldn't be bothered to understand. He was living in the same house, but in a completely different reality. One evening he came home late, buzzing with excitement. "I sealed the preliminary deal with a potential client today," he announced, throwing his jacket on a chair. "He'll be at the Gala. If I can get him to sign, my partnership is guaranteed. This is it, Hannah. Everything I've worked for." Hannah looked up from her laptop, where she was approving the final seating chart for the Gala's VIP section. "That's nice, Josiah," she said, her tone perfectly neutral. He frowned, finally sensing a shift in the atmosphere. "Nice. It's spectacular. You know you could try to be a little more supportive. This is for us. For the baby." The sheer audacity of his statement almost made her laugh. He hadn't asked about her doctor's appointment that morning, hadn't noticed the new confidence in her eyes, hadn't seen the fire she was building right under his roof. He was so blinded by his own ambition that he couldn't see the supernova igniting beside him. "I think you'll find I am very supportive of true innovation, Josiah," she said, closing her laptop. "More than you could possibly imagine." He shook his head, dismissing her cryptic comment. "Whatever. Just make sure my black tie suit is cleaned, okay? The Gala is Friday. I can't have any distractions." "Don't worry," Hannah said, rising from her chair and walking towards the bedroom. "There won't be any distractions." She paused at the door, looking back at him as he loosened his tie, already lost in his own world again. "I'll make sure of it." The week of the Gala. Josiah Fitzpatrick was electric. He moved with the predatory grace of a shark that scented blood in the water. Every conversation at Thornton and Gage was a strategic move, every handshake a calculated alliance. The partnership wasn't just a job title, it was an ascension. It meant a corner office with a panoramic view, a 7-figure bonus, and most importantly, the validation he craved. It was the proof that he was and always had been a man who mattered. His rival, Gregory Pike, watched him with a mixture of envy and contempt. Gregory was competent, but lacked Josiah's killer instinct. He was a steady workhorse, while Josiah was a thoroughbred racehorse, and they both knew it. "Don't count your chickens before they hatch." "Fitzpatrick." Gregory sneered by the coffee machine on Wednesday. "I hear the main sponsor this year is a real heavyweight. Someone new. They'll be the kingmaker of the night. Whoever gets their attention wins." Josiah just smirked. "That's the difference between you and me, Greg. You wait for kingmakers. I make my own kingdom." At home, the apartment felt like a hotel. He came and went, leaving a trail of discarded clothes and coffee cups. Hannah was a fleeting presence. He'd see her reading in bed, or hear her on the phone in the spare room she'd converted into a nursery. Her pregnancy seemed to be progressing her belly, now a perfect, pronounced globe. He felt a vague, dutiful sense of responsibility, but it was buried under layers of ambition. The baby was an abstract concept, a future event to be dealt with later. The gala was real, it was immediate, it was everything. On Thursday night, the evening before the gala, he was rehearsing his talking points in front of the living room mirror. He had a list of people to target: CEOs, venture capitalists, board members. He had anecdotes prepared, market predictions polished. He was a weapon, primed and ready. Hannah walked into the room holding a glass of water. She looked serene, a stark contrast to his frenetic energy. "Are you excited for tomorrow?" she asked, her voice calm. "Excited doesn't cover it," he said, adjusting his imaginary tie. "This is the culmination of 5 years of my life. It's a shame you can't come. You know you really should have gotten a dress. You could have just sat at the company table. But I guess you're right, it's probably for the best. It's a long night, and in your condition." He trailed off, the implication hanging in the air. "You wouldn't fit in." She didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she gave him a small, enigmatic smile. "I'm sure it will be an unforgettable evening. For everyone." He barely registered her tone. He was too absorbed in his own reflection. "It will be. Once I'm a partner, things will be different. We can get a bigger place. You can hire a full-time nanny. You won't have to worry about a thing." He finally turned to her, a magnanimous smile on his face, as if bestowing a great gift. It was in that moment that Hannah saw him with perfect, painful clarity. He wasn't offering her a future. He was offering her a gilded cage. He believed that his success would be the balm for his neglect, that a bigger house would patch the holes in their marriage. He wasn't building a future for them. He was building it for himself, and she and the baby were just part of the set dressing. "I'm going to stay at my mother's tonight," she said simply. "It's quieter there. I need to rest before everything." "Good idea," he said, instantly relieved. "You get your rest. I need to be completely focused tomorrow. No distractions." It didn't even occur to him to offer to go with her, or to question why she was suddenly leaving the night before his big event. Her absence was a convenience. He walked over and placed a hand on her belly. The baby kicked a firm, definite thump against his palm. For a second, a flicker of something real wonder connection crossed his face. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the familiar glint of ambition. "He's got a kick like a champion," Josiah said, his mind already back on the gala. "He's a Fitzpatrick after all." He then uttered the words that would later haunt him, the words that perfectly encapsulated his blindness. "You know, Hannah, while I'm out there changing the world tomorrow, just try to relax and think about what color to paint the nursery. We'll need you to handle all that." Hannah didn't flinch. She simply looked at him, her eyes clear and steady. "I will, Josiah," she said. "I'll be thinking a lot about the future. You have a good night." He watched her leave a small overnight bag in her hand and felt nothing but a sense of freedom. The apartment was his. The night was his. The future was his. He spent the next few hours on the phone, schmoozing, confirming meetings, laying the final bricks of his glorious ascent. He fell asleep in their marital bed alone and triumphant, dreaming of flashing cameras and applause. He had his golden ticket, and he was absolutely certain it would lead him to the kingdom he deserved. The Phoenix Grand Ballroom was a cathedral of wealth and power. 3-story-high ceilings were adorned with crystal chandeliers that cast a diamond-like shimmer over the attendees. A string quartet played softly in the mezzanine, their music a tasteful backdrop to the low hum of influential conversations. Josiah Fitzpatrick stepped through the grand entrance and breathed it all in. This was his element. The air tasted of success. He looked impeccable in his custom-tailored tuxedo. He moved through the initial receiving line with practiced ease, his smile charming, his handshake firm. He spotted his boss, Mr. Donovan, a portly man with a booming voice and eyes that missed nothing, holding court near the main bar. "Fitzpatrick, glad you could make it," Donovan bellowed, clapping Josiah on the shoulder. "Big night. Nerves of steel, I hope?" "Only the best, sir," Josiah replied smoothly. "I was just speaking with Robert from Kenwood Equity. He's very interested in our new portfolio." Donovan's eyes lit up. "Excellent. That's the kind of initiative that gets you noticed." He leaned in conspiratorially. "Listen, the real prize tonight is the sponsor. The Reed Foundation. They came out of nowhere, snatched the top sponsorship, and poured a fortune into this event. Nobody knows who runs it, but they're a major new player. I want a meeting. You see an opening, you take it." "Understand." "Crystal clear," Sir Josiah said, his mind already racing. The Reed Foundation. He'd make it his mission to find their representative. His rival, Gregory Pike, sidled up, a champagne flute in hand. "Quite the scene, isn't it, Josiah? A bit out of your league, I'd think." "Where's your better half? I assumed she'd be here to cheer you on." The question was laced with condescension. "Hannah's resting," Josiah said coolly. "We felt it best she not overexert herself. She's focused on more important things." He made it sound noble, protective, as if his decision was for her benefit. The ballroom was abuzz with speculation about the mysterious sponsor. The name the Reed Foundation was on everyone's lips. Some whispered it was old money from the East Coast. Others claimed it was a secretive tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. The anonymity had created a powerful mystique. To be associated with them, to be the first to forge an alliance, would be a massive coup. Josiah spent the next hour working the room like a master. He moved from group to group, dropping strategic comments, laughing at the right jokes, making connections. He felt invincible, a maestro conducting a symphony of networking. He was so caught up in his performance that he didn't notice the subtle shift in the room's energy. The lights dimmed slightly. The string quartet faded out. A man in a sharp tuxedo, the event's master of ceremonies, walked to the podium on the grand stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." The MC's voice boomed through the sound system. A hush fell over the crowd. Josiah, standing beside Mr. Donovan and a few other senior partners from the firm, straightened his tie. This was it. The main event was starting. "It is our honor every year to be supported by leaders of industry and philanthropy," the MC continued. "But this year, we have been humbled by the extraordinary generosity of a new and visionary partner. This organization has not only underwritten tonight's event, but has also pledged a 7-figure grant to our Youth Innovation Program." A wave of impressed murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Josiah saw the avaricious gleam in Donovan's eyes. For months, the leader of this foundation has chosen to remain anonymous, preferring to let their incredible work speak for itself. But tonight, they have graciously agreed to step into the light and share their vision with us. Josiah leaned towards Donovan. "This is our opening, sir," he whispered. "Whoever this is, I'll get to them." The MC paused for dramatic effect, his smile widening. It is my distinct and profound honor to introduce to you the brilliant mind, the compassionate heart, and the visionary founder of the Reed Foundation, our main sponsor for this evening." Josiah's heart hammered in his chest. This was the moment that would define his night, his career. He scanned the wings of the stage, expecting to see some formidable grey-haired tycoon or a slick tech guru step out. The MC's voice rose, filling every corner of the vast ballroom. "Please join me in giving a massive welcome to Ms. Hannah Reed." The name hit Josiah like a physical blow. Reed, Hannah's maiden name. For a surreal second, his mind refused to process it. It was a mistake. A bizarre, impossible coincidence. There must be another Hannah Reed, a different one, a powerful one. Not his Hannah. His quiet, compliant, stay-at-home wife, who was probably at her mother's right now, picking out paint colors for a nursery. And then she walked out onto the stage. The woman who emerged from the wings was both Hannah and not Hannah. It was as if the soft watercolor version of her he knew had been repainted in bold, vibrant oils. She wore the emerald silk gown, a cascade of deep green that shimmered under the stage lights. It was cut with an elegance that was both classic and daring, accentuating the proud curve of her pregnancy. Her hair, which she usually wore in a simple ponytail, was styled in soft, glamorous waves that framed a face he had never seen before, one filled with unshakable poise and a serene, incandescent confidence. She was breathtaking. She was terrifying. A collective gasp went through the ballroom, followed by a wave of confused whispering. Josiah felt the blood drain from his face. His entire body went cold, then hot with a dizzying rush of disbelief. He could feel the eyes of his colleagues turning towards him. Donovan stared, his mouth slightly agape, his gaze flickering between the woman on stage and the shell-shocked man beside him. Gregory Pike's jaw had literally dropped. Josiah's mind was a maelstrom of denial. This isn't happening. It's a dream, a hallucination. But it was happening. Hannah stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone with a steady hand, and smiled at the sea of faces staring up at her. It was a genuine, warm smile, but it held a power he had never witnessed. When she spoke, her voice was not the soft, tentative one he was used to tuning out. It was clear, resonant, and commanded the attention of every single person in the room. "Good evening," she began. "For a long time, I have believed in the power of working behind the scenes. I believed that true impact didn't require a name or a face, only a mission. I named my foundation after my family, the Reeds engineers and dreamers, who taught me that the most elegant solution is often the one that works silently, efficiently in the background, making everything else possible." Every word was a perfectly aimed arrow, and Josiah felt each one pierce his soul. Working behind the scenes, making everything else possible. She was talking about her foundation, but she was also talking about her life with him. He risked a glance at Donovan. His boss's face was a mask of utter astonishment, rapidly curdling into something that looked dangerously like fury. He was realizing that one of his own analysts was married to the biggest philanthropic prize in the city, and had apparently never thought it was worth mentioning. Hannah continued her speech, her voice gaining strength. She spoke about the future of technology, not in the dry, jargon-filled way Josiah did, but with passion and humanity. She talked about investing in people, not just products. She spoke of the importance of seeing potential, where others saw only silence or obscurity. "There is a tendency," she said, her eyes sweeping across the audience to overlook the quiet forces that shape our world. We are drawn to the loudest voice in the room, the most dazzling display. But innovation, true lasting change, is often born in quiet rooms out of sight. It is nurtured not by ego, but by dedication. It is the seed that grows in the dark, long before it ever breaks the surface. The room was utterly captivated. They weren't just listening to a sponsor. They were listening to a leader, a visionary. Josiah felt a wave of nausea. This was the woman he had told to go pick out paint colors. This was the woman he had accused of overreacting when she feared for their child's life. This was the woman whose calls he ignored, whose needs he dismissed, whose brilliance he had been completely and unforgivably blind to. She never once looked directly at him. Her gaze was fixed on the audience on the horizon, on the future she was so eloquently describing. And in her deliberate avoidance there was a message more damning than any direct accusation. To her, in that moment, he simply wasn't there. He was irrelevant. An invisible man in a room where she was the only one who mattered. So tonight, she concluded her hand resting gently on her baby bump. I ask you not only to invest in new companies, but to invest in new perspectives, to look for the potential that isn't shouting for your attention, to build a future where every contribution is seen, every voice is valued, and where the architects of our world, no matter how silently they work, are given their due. Thank you. For a heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Then the ballroom erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous, rolling, standing ovation. The most powerful people in the city were on their feet, their faces alight with admiration for his wife. His wife. As Hannah smiled and gave a small, graceful nod, Josiah Fitzpatrick stood frozen in place, a statue in a bespoke suit. The golden ticket he had prized so highly had just gone up in flames. He wasn't in a kingdom he had built. He was a fool in a court he didn't even know existed, and the queen on the throne was the woman he had left at home. The moment Hannah stepped down from the stage, she was enveloped. A tidal wave of the city's elite CEOs, tech moguls, political figures surged forward, all vying for a moment of her time. Josiah watched, paralyzed, as his boss, Mr. Donovan, shoved past him without a word, his face flushed with a desperate eagerness. An absolutely astonishing speech, Donovan boomed, reaching her before anyone else. He took her hand, his demeanor fawning. Donovan from Thornton and Gage, your vision is exactly what this city needs. We would be honored, truly honored, to discuss a potential partnership. Hannah smiled graciously, a queen holding court. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. I'm always open to discussing partnerships with firms that have a forward-thinking vision. Josiah felt a bitter laugh rise in his throat. Forward-thinking. He was the firm's golden boy, their forward thinker, and he hadn't had the foresight to see the titan of industry sleeping next to him every night. He tried to move towards her to push through the crowd. He needed to say something to understand, to reclaim some piece of this fractured reality. But as he took a step, a firm hand landed on his arm. It was Gregory Pike. The smirk on his rival's face was a masterpiece of schadenfreude. Fitzpatrick Gregory, said his voice dripping with faux sympathy. I had absolutely no idea your wife was, well, her, keeping such a powerful asset a secret. Bold move. A little too bold, perhaps. The jab hit its mark. It wasn't just that Josiah didn't know. The assumption in the room was now that he did know, and had hidden her a strategic deception that had now blown up in his face. It was an infinitely more humiliating narrative. He was no longer just a neglectful husband. He was a failed strategist. He shook Gregory's hand off and finally managed to break through the inner circle of admirers, just as Hannah was being escorted towards a private reception room by the event organizers. Her personal security, two imposing men in sharp suits he had never seen before, moved with her. "Hannah," he called out, his voice sounding weak and desperate even to his own ears. She stopped and turned. The noise of the crowd seemed to fade away. For the first time that night, her eyes met his. There was no anger in them. There was no hatred. There was something far worse, a calm, piercing pity. It was the look one gives to a stranger who has taken a wrong turn. "Josiah," she said, her voice even. "I'm surprised to see you here." The absurdity of her statement floored him. "Surprised I work here. This is my gala." "What is all this, Hannah?" "The foundation, the speech." "When did this happen?" A small, sad smile touched her lips. "This has always been happening, Josiah. You just never thought to look. But why didn't you tell me?" He pleaded the foundation of his world, crumbling with every word. "Tell you," she asked, and for the first time a flicker of the pain he'd inflicted showed in her eyes. "Tell the man who advised me to focus on nursery colors while he changed the world. The man who couldn't be bothered to come to a single ultrasound after the first. The man who told me I was overreacting when I was terrified for our child's health. What exactly should I have told you, Josiah? And when would you have had the time to listen?" He had no answer. Her words were the truth, and the truth was a brutal indictment. He saw Mr. Donovan watching them from a few feet away, his expression hardening with every word Hannah spoke. The story was piecing itself together in his boss's mind, and it was a story of Josiah's colossal, unforgivable foolishness. The partnership he had been so certain of was evaporating before his very eyes. "I have to go, Josiah," Hannah said, turning away. "I have meetings with people who are interested in my work." The finality in her tone was like a door slamming shut. "Wait," he said, reaching for her arm. Before his fingers could touch the silk of her sleeve, one of her security guards stepped between them, a silent, immovable barrier. "Ma'am?" the guard asked her, ignoring Josiah completely. "It's all right, Peter," she said calmly. "We're done here." And with that, she walked away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the glittering ballroom. The applause for her still echoed in his ears, but for him it was the sound of his own ruin. He was a ghost at the feast, a laughingstock in a tuxedo. He had walked in that evening as Josiah Fitzpatrick, the conqueror. He would leave as something much less just Hannah Reed's husband. And soon he suspected not even that. The days following the gala were a masterclass in humiliation, each one a new lesson in the art of being invisible. When Josiah walked into the gleaming lobby of Thornton & Gage on Monday morning, the atmosphere was different. The usual buzz of pre-market chatter died down as he passed. The air grew thick with unspoken words. Colleagues who had once vied for his attention, who had laughed too loudly at his jokes, now found fascinating points of interest on their shoes or the ceiling tiles. He was a ghost haunting the scene of his former glory, and the whispers that followed him were like the rustling of dry leaves. He was no longer Josiah Fitzpatrick, the rising star. He was a cautionary tale. A punchline, Mr. Donovan's assistant called him not 10 minutes after he'd reached his desk. Her voice stripped of its usual warmth, now holding the sterile chill of a surgeon about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. "Mr. Donovan will see you now." Josiah walked the familiar path to the corner office, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence of his own mind. This was the office he had coveted, the view he had dreamed of. Today it felt like a courtroom. Donovan was standing by the panoramic window, his back to the door, looking down at the city Josiah had once believed was his to conquer. He didn't turn around when Josiah entered. "You know, Fitzpatrick." Donovan began, his voice a low rumble. "I pride myself on my ability to assess value. I look at a company, a stock, a person, and I see the potential, the risk, the bottom line. It's what I've built this firm on." He finally turned, his eyes cold and hard as granite. "For 5 years I assessed you as a high-value asset. Ambitious, ruthless, smart. I was wrong." Josiah opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, but Donovan held up a hand, silencing him. "Your failure isn't that you were married to the most influential new player in the tech and philanthropy sectors. Your failure is that you were sitting on a gold mine and were too blind to see you were holding a shovel. It speaks to a catastrophic lack of perception. It calls into question every deal you've ever made, every analysis you've ever presented. If you can't see what's right in front of you, if you can't see the value in your own home, you have no business managing our clients' futures." The words were precise, brutal, and utterly irrefutable. There was no argument Josiah could offer. His greatest professional sin wasn't greed or incompetence. It was a blindness so profound it constituted a betrayal of his very craft. "Your major accounts are being reassigned to Gregory Pike, effective immediately," Donovan stated flatly. "Your new desk is on the 17th floor. Data analysis. You'll report to the junior risk management team." It was a career death sentence. The 17th floor was a purgatory for has-beens and new hires, a cubicle farm far from the executive suites and the thrum of real power. He was being buried alive. The walk of shame from the executive floor to the 17th was the longest of his life. He packed the contents of his spacious desk into a single cardboard box, the photos and deal trophies feeling like artifacts from another man's life. As he stepped out of the elevator into the sea of grey cubicles, he saw Gregory Pike standing with a few other senior analysts right beside Josiah's old office. Gregory caught his eye, raised a coffee cup in a mock toast, and offered a smile that was pure venomous victory. The days bled into one another in a monotonous haze of spreadsheets and obscurity. But the punishment at work was nothing compared to the desolation that awaited him at home. The apartment, once a symbol of his success, was now a monument to his failure. It was cold, cavernous, and suffocatingly silent. Hannah never came back. One evening, he arrived to find the space fundamentally altered. A professional moving company had been there, their efficiency, a quiet, final judgment. He walked through the rooms as if in a trance. Her scent of lavender and vanilla was gone from the pillows. The closet was a yawning chasm of emptiness on her side. The small, worn armchair where she used to sit and read, her feet tucked beneath her, was gone. The nursery, which had been filled with boxes of unassembled furniture and gifts from a baby shower he hadn't attended, was now starkly, achingly empty. They had taken everything that was hers, erasing her presence with a terrifying thoroughness. They left behind only the things they had bought together, the soulless furniture, the impersonal art, the hollow shell of a life he had single-handedly destroyed. His desperation clawed at him. He was a man drowning, grasping for a life raft that was already miles away. He bombarded her phone with messages, his thumbs flying across the screen in a frantic, pathetic dance. "Hannah, please just talk to me. We can fix this. I know we can. I'm at the apartment. It's so empty. Please come home. I understand now. I was a fool. A complete and utter fool. I'm so sorry. What about the baby?" "Our baby. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" His calls went straight to a polite, automated voicemail. His emails vanished into a digital void. He had spent years making her feel unheard, and now she had simply turned off the sound. In the crushing silence, Josiah was finally forced to confront the wreckage of his own character. Stripped of his ambition, his status, his purpose, he had nothing left to look at but himself, and he despised what he saw. He saw an ego so bloated it had left no room for anyone else. He had treated his wife, the mother of his child, as a domestic appliance, an accessory to his life, whose only function was to run smoothly in the background. The irony was a physical pain, a constant dull ache in his chest. She held the keys to the kingdom he had been trying to conquer, and he had told her to go pick out paint colors. He hadn't just ignored her. He had fundamentally misjudged her worth, a fatal error for an investment analyst, a damning sin for a husband. The final blow came a month after the gala. It arrived not as a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet, indifferent efficiency of a business transaction. A courier appeared at his new cubicle on the 17th floor, the professional envelope in his hand, a stark contrast to the dreary environment. The low murmur of the office stilled. He could feel the eyes of his new colleagues on him as he signed the digital clipboard, his hand trembling slightly. He waited until his lunch break, taking the thick envelope to an empty stairwell that smelled of disinfectant. He tore it open. Inside were divorce papers from the city's most prestigious family law firm. The language was cold and precise, citing irreconcilable differences. Tucked within was a detailed proposal for a co-parenting agreement. It was, to his surprise, incredibly fair. It offered him scheduled visitation rights, shared holidays, a structured path to being a father. But it came with conditions: the mandatory completion of a parenting course and court-ordered therapy sessions to address his past behavioral patterns. It was clinical, detached, and utterly non-negotiable. She wasn't punishing him. She was managing him, mitigating him as a potential risk to her child. Beneath the sterile legal documents, there was one last sheet of paper. It was heavy, cream-colored stock, the kind he vaguely remembered her buying once. On it, in her familiar, elegant handwriting, was a short note. "Josiah, I spent a long time waiting for you to see me. I now realize that was my mistake. My worth is not dependent on your validation. I am building a new life now, a safe and stable one for our child. This will be their future. The enclosed plan is not an invitation to negotiate our relationship. That relationship is over. It is an invitation for you to be a father. Our child will deserve a father who is present and gusht and supportive. I truly hope for their sake you can learn to become that man. I wish you peace, Josiah. Goodbye, Hannah." He read the note once then, twice then, a dozen times. The paper grew damp in his hands. There was no anger, no hatred, no vengeful fire in her words. There was only a profound and unshakable finality. This wasn't the act of a woman seeking revenge. It was the act of a woman who had already moved on, who was simply tidying up the last loose end of a life she had outgrown. She hadn't destroyed his life. She had simply built her own, and its foundations were in a place he could no longer reach. Josiah sat there in the sterile stairwell, the divorce papers on his lap. His world reduced to a handful of paper. He looked out the grimy window at the only view his new station in life afforded him, the weathered brick wall of the building next door. There was no skyline, no horizon, no future. He had chased a title, a corner office, a kingdom of his own making. In the end, he was left with nothing but a cubicle, an empty apartment, and the crushing karmic weight of a lesson he had learned far, far too late. The future had arrived just as he'd always planned. It just didn't belong to him. What a powerful and sobering story of karma and consequence. It's a stark reminder that the people we take for granted often hold a value we can't even begin to comprehend. Josiah was so blinded by his own ambition, so focused on the life he wanted to build, that he completely missed the incredible woman who was building an empire right beside him. He saw her pregnancy as a burden and her needs as a distraction, only to discover that she was the very definition of the power and success he craved. In the end, he didn't just lose a wife, he lost the chance to share in a legacy he wasn't wise enough to see. His story is a warning. The loudest person in the room isn't always the most powerful, and true worth is often found in the quiet strength we choose to ignore. What did you think of Josiah's downfall? Was it deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good story of karmic justice, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.